Next is you want to activate continuously. So remember, you're in Grand Theft Auto, you get out of the car, you have walking actions. You get in the car, you have driving actions. So you want to activate the action set. The Steam Controller API specifically recommends that you not do it only once on state change. You should be doing it continuously. So whenever your game presumably stores whatever current state it's in, and based on that, in your update loop, you should be like, driving controls, driving controls, driving controls, driving controls. And they've written it so it's a cheap call so that you can safely do it constantly. And you're just less likely to have bugs if you just spam it constantly rather than only doing it, intermittently. Next, let's talk about the actual data you get from stuff. So this is how you actually get what's happening, right? This is the meat of your actual input. Get digital action data and get analog action data. And by the way, you should go out and read the actual Steam Controller documentation because I can't be nearly as thorough. This is just to make it human friendly and everything. But anyway, so these are your functions that you're going to call to get your actual information. So if it's a digital action, it's just going to tell you, hey bro, that action set is active and its state is 0 or 1. The be active here, obviously Boolean, that is going to be false if that action set isn't active. So if you ask for a battle command and you're in menu mode, it's always going to be false on this variable. And you're also going to get, and you also get false if the action set's not active. But if it is active, you'll get true or false for this. Now that's not just pressed, that's not just released, that is pressed this frame? Is the button physically depressed? And I'll get into in a second why that's relevant. And then in analog, you will get the same, is it active or not, but you'll also get your X and Y data. If it's a single axis, action, like for spraying a fire hose and you've got that bound to the analog trigger, then it's only going to give you X. I believe Y will always be 0. But that's your stuff. And those are 2 floating point numbers. They can be between -1 and 0 and 1, or between 1 and 0 depending on the nature of the thingy. But yeah, that's how you get your input. And you should call this every frame, obviously. Now, this is not necessarily anything that has to do with the Steam Controller API itself, but it's something I highly recommend in order to get good input. Like I said before, I'm an open source contributor to the Hacks Flixel game framework, and something that they put in that I really, really like is what, for lack of a better name, I just call an input state tracker. And what you want to do is you want to take your raw input and track the input state over time. I've seen a bunch of people's first Game Maker game where they're like, okay, on A, shoot, but wait, I need to check if can shoot because I don't want you to just shoot 7 million bullets. So I want you to you push the button and then you release, and then I have to check when you released it and then do the thing. What that boils down to is on just pressed A, shoot button. That's what your code wants to look, and this enables that. You don't have just pressed or released. You have pressed, just pressed, released, and just released. So how do you get that? You create a really thin layer over the action in question on your own code, and you just watch what the state is and compare it to what it was last frame. So pressed, frame 1, the button is released. So pressed is false, just pressed is false, released is true, just released is false. Okay, next frame we pushed it. So pressed is true, just pressed is true because pressed wasn't true last frame, so that's flipped up. It's not released, and it's not just released. Frame 3, we keep holding it into the next frame. It's no longer just pressed. And then we release it on the next frame, and not only is it released, it was just released based on the state of last frame. This is really easy to rig up, makes your input code really nice, really clean. I highly recommend you do it. It takes about 2 minutes. Go ahead and do it.